The morning sun filtered through the classroom windows, casting long shadows across the rows of small desks. Mrs. Chen had been teaching third grade for almost 15 years now, and she thought she'd seen everything. But every year, there was always something that surprised her, something that reminded her why she chose this profession in the first place. Today was going to be one of those days, though she didn't know it yet. She stood at the front of the classroom, watching as her students filed in one by one. Some came in chattering excitedly about the latest cartoon they'd watched. Others dragged their feet, still sleepy and wishing they could be back in bed. A few were already at their desks, organizing their pencils and notebooks with the kind of careful attention that only 8-year-olds could muster. "Good morning, everyone," Mrs. Chen said warmly, clapping her hands together. "Please take your seats. We have something special planned for today." The word special always got their attention. 23 pairs of eyes turned toward her, curious and alert. She smiled, feeling that familiar flutter of excitement she always got when introducing a new lesson. "Today we're going to write letters," she announced. A few groans echoed through the room. Letters weren't as exciting as art class or story time, but Mrs. Chen raised her hand gently and the groaning stopped. "Not just any letters," she continued. "These are going to be thank you letters. I want each of you to think about someone special in your life. Someone who does things for you. Someone who makes your life better. It could be a parent, a grandparent, a friend, a neighbor, anyone who matters to you." She walked to the board and picked up a piece of chalk. "You're going to write them a letter telling them thank you for something specific. Not just thank you for everything. I want you to really think about what this person does that makes you grateful." The energy in the room shifted. Some kids were already raising their hands, eager to share who they were going to write to. A girl in the front row was already pulling out her favorite purple pen. 2 boys in the middle were whispering to each other about writing to their soccer coach. Mrs. Chen loved this part. She loved seeing them engaged, thinking deeply about the people in their lives. In a world where children were often rushed from one activity to another, it was important to slow down and notice the good things, the good people. "Does everyone understand?" she asked. A chorus of yes filled the room. "Wonderful. You have the rest of the morning to write your letters. Take your time, think carefully, and remember the best writing comes from the heart." The classroom erupted into activity. Notebooks flipped open. Pencils were sharpened. Some children chewed on their erasers thoughtfully while others dove right in, their pencils racing across the page. Mrs. Chen walked slowly between the rows, her hands clasped behind her back. She loved this part too, watching them work, seeing the concentration on their faces. Every now and then, she'd stop and lean over to read a few lines, offering encouragement or helping with a tricky spelling. "That's a beautiful thought, Danny," she said to a boy writing about his grandmother's cookies. "Great job on your handwriting." "Lisa," she told a girl whose letters were perfectly formed and evenly spaced. As she made her way toward the back of the classroom, she noticed one student who wasn't writing. The boy sat perfectly still, staring down at his blank paper. His pencil rested in his hand, but he hadn't written a single word. His name was Tommy, and he was one of the quieter students in her class. Not shy exactly, but reserved. He did his work without complaining, never caused trouble, and mostly kept to himself during recess. Mrs. Chen had noticed that he often seemed tired, and his clothes, while clean, were worn and patched in places. She approached his desk carefully, not wanting to startle him or make him feel singled out. "Tommy," she said gently, "how's it going? Having trouble getting started?" He looked up at her with those serious brown eyes of his. For a moment he didn't say anything. Then he nodded slowly. "Who are you thinking of writing to?" she asked, crouching down beside his desk so they were at eye level. "My mom," he said quietly. "That's wonderful. Your mom would love to receive a letter from you, I'm sure." Tommy nodded again, but still didn't write anything. "Are you not sure what to say?" Mrs. Chen asked. "I know what to say," Tommy replied. There's a lot." Mrs. Chen smiled. "That's actually a good problem to have. It means you have lots to be grateful for. Why don't you start with just one thing? The first thing that comes to mind when you think about your mom." Tommy looked down at his paper. His grip tightened on his pencil. "Okay," he said. Mrs. Chen gave his shoulder a gentle pat and stood up. "You're doing great. Just take your time." She moved on to help other students, but she kept glancing back at Tommy. He remained still for several more minutes, as if gathering his thoughts or his courage. She wondered what was going through his mind. Around the classroom, the other children were making progress. Some were already on their second page. A few had started drawing pictures to go along with their letters. The room was filled with the soft sounds of pencils scratching on paper and the occasional whispered question. Mrs. Chen, how do you spell appreciate? Mrs. Chen, can I write to my dog? Mrs. Chen, is it okay if my letter is really long? She answered each question patiently, moving from desk to desk like a gardener tending to plants. Each child needed something different. Some needed spelling help. Others needed encouragement. A few needed to be reminded to focus on their own work and stop chatting with their neighbors. Through it all, Tommy sat in the back, still staring at his paper. About 20 minutes into the assignment, Mrs. Chen noticed something. Tommy's pencil was finally moving. His head was bent low over his desk, and he was writing slowly but steadily. She felt a small surge of relief. Sometimes kids just needed extra time to process things. She decided not to interrupt him. Whatever had been holding him back, he'd worked through it on his own. That was important too, learning to push past that initial hesitation. The morning wore on. One by one, students began finishing their letters. Some jumped up immediately to show Mrs. Chen their work, proud and eager for her approval. Others sat back in their chairs with satisfied smiles, rereading what they'd written. When you're finished, Mrs. Chen announced, you can decorate your letter if you'd like. Add some drawings, make it colorful, make it special. This instruction was met with enthusiasm. Crayons and colored pencils appeared. The letters transformed into works of art, bordered with hearts and stars and flowers. One boy drew an elaborate frame around his letter that looked like a football field. A girl covered hers in tiny, detailed butterflies. But Tommy didn't reach for any colors. He just kept writing, his pencil moving across the page in careful, deliberate strokes. Mrs. Chen noticed that he'd filled the entire front of his paper and had flipped it over to continue on the back. That was unusual. Most of the kids had written maybe half a page, some only a few sentences. Tommy's letter was turning into something substantial. The morning stretched toward lunchtime. Most of the students had finished and were now chatting quietly or reading books from the classroom library. Mrs. Chen gave them free time as a reward for completing their assignment. Finally, Tommy set down his pencil. He didn't jump up like the others. He just sat there looking at what he'd written. His expression was hard to read. Not quite sad, but not happy either. Something in between, something that looked almost like relief. Mrs. Chen made her way over to him. All done? She asked. Tommy nodded. He carefully folded his letter in half and then in half again. Would you like to share it with the class? Mrs. Chen asked. Several students had already volunteered to read their letters aloud, and it had been a sweet experience hearing them express gratitude for parents who made them breakfast, siblings who played with them, and teachers who helped them learn. But Tommy shook his head quickly. No, thank you. That's okay, Mrs. Chen said. These letters are personal. You don't have to share if you don't want to. She paused, then added, I do need to collect them, though, just so I can look them over before you give them to the people you wrote to, just to check for spelling and grammar. Is that all right? Tommy hesitated for a moment, then nodded and handed her the folded paper. Thank you. Tommy, I'll take good care of it. The bell rang for lunch, and the classroom erupted into chaos as children grabbed their lunchboxes and lined up at the door. Mrs. Chen ushered them toward the cafeteria, reminding them to walk, not run, in the hallways. When they were gone, she returned to her quiet classroom. The letters sat in a neat stack on her desk, waiting to be read. She picked up her red pen, ready to make corrections and offer encouraging comments. She had no idea that one of those letters was about to change everything. Mrs. Chen settled into her chair with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, painting warm squares on the floor. She could hear the distant sounds of children playing at recess, their laughter carrying on the breeze. She picked up the first letter from the pile and began to read. It was from Katie, written to her grandmother. The handwriting was bubbly and enthusiastic, with hearts dotting every I. Dear Grandma, thank you for teaching me how to bake cookies. I love spending time in your kitchen. You make the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. Love, Katie. Mrs. Chen smiled and wrote a small note at the bottom in her neat cursive. Beautiful letter, Katie. Your grandma will treasure this. The next letter was from David, thanking his dad for coaching his baseball team. The one after that was from Jennifer, expressing gratitude to her older sister for helping her with homework. Each letter was sweet and sincere in its own way. Mrs. Chen worked through them steadily, making small corrections here and there. A misspelled word, a missing comma. Nothing major. These were third graders after all, and she wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for heart, and these letters had plenty of that. About halfway through the stack, she came to Tommy's letter. It was more worn than the others, the paper soft from being handled. She could see the fold lines where he'd creased it carefully. She unfolded it gently and smoothed it out on her desk. His handwriting was smaller than most of the other students', cramped and careful, as if he wanted to fit as much as possible on the page. She noticed right away that he'd used both sides of the paper, filling every available space with words. "Dear Mom," it began. Mrs. Chen took a sip of her cold coffee and started reading. "I wanted to write you this letter to say thank you for a lot of things. I know you work really hard and I see everything you do even when you think I don't notice." Already something about the tone felt different from the other letters. There was a weight to it, a seriousness that the others didn't have. "Thank you for working at the diner during the day and then cleaning offices at night. I know you get tired because sometimes I hear you come home and I hear your footsteps and they sound slow and heavy. You try to be quiet, but I'm usually awake." Mrs. Chen's hand paused over the paper. She read the sentence again. "Thank you for always walking me to school even though I know your feet hurt. I see you rubbing them when you think I'm not looking. I heard you tell Mrs. Rodriguez next door that your shoes have holes in them, but you're waiting until next month to get new ones because you want to make sure I have everything I need for school first, the cow." Coffee cup slipped slightly in Mrs. Chen's hand. She set it down carefully and leaned closer to the letter. "Thank you for making sure I eat breakfast every day. I know that you don't always eat breakfast because you say you're not hungry, but I think maybe you're just making sure there's enough for me. Last week when we had pancakes, you said you already ate, but I didn't see any dishes in the sink." Mrs. Chen's throat tightened. She was starting to understand something she should have noticed before. "Thank you for giving me your jacket when it was cold last winter. I know you said you weren't cold, but I saw you shivering when we walked to school. You told me you liked the cold, but I don't think that's true. I think you just wanted me to be warm." The classroom suddenly felt too quiet. Mrs. Chen could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second marking time she couldn't get back, time when she hadn't noticed what was right in front of her. "Thank you for keeping the apartment warm even though I know heat costs money. I heard you on the phone with the electric company asking about payment plans. You didn't know I was listening. I'm sorry for listening, but I was worried about you." Mrs. Chen's vision blurred slightly. She blinked and continued reading. "Thank you for always having Band-Aids and medicine when I'm sick. I know you skip going to the doctor when you're sick because it costs too much money. I heard you coughing really bad last month, but you said you were fine. You're always making sure I'm okay even when you're not okay." The words on the page seemed to grow heavier with each line. "Thank you for my birthday present last year. I loved the soccer ball. I found the receipt by accident and I saw that you returned your new shoes to buy it for me. I didn't say anything because I didn't want you to feel bad, but I want you to know that I know, and I'm sorry you had to do that." Mrs. Chen set the letter down and pressed her hand against her mouth. Images flashed through her mind. Tommy sitting quietly at his desk. Tommy in his worn sneakers. Tommy who never asked for new supplies even when his pencils were worn down to nubs. Tommy who always ate his entire lunch, slowly and carefully, never wasting a crumb. How had she not seen it? How had she not noticed? She picked up the letter again, forcing herself to continue. "Thank you for letting me have the bed and you sleep on the couch. I know the couch is uncomfortable because I sat on it and the springs are broken. You say you like sleeping on the couch, but I don't believe you. I think you just want me to be comfortable." The professionalism she usually maintained while reading student work was crumbling. These weren't just the words of a child completing an assignment. This was a testimony of love and sacrifice that most adults couldn't articulate so clearly. "Thank you for never complaining. You always smile when you pick me up from school even though I know you're tired. You ask me about my day and you really listen to my answers. You help me with my homework even after you worked all day. You never make me feel like I'm a burden." Mrs. Chen thought about all the times she'd complained about small inconveniences. Traffic on the way to work, grading papers on a Sunday afternoon, spending money on her usual coffee shop order. Things that suddenly seemed absurdly trivial. "Thank you for reading to me at night even when you're so tired your eyes are closing. Sometimes you fall asleep in the middle of the story, but I don't mind. I just watch you sleep for a little bit and I feel happy that you're resting. The letter went on, detail after detail, observation after observation. Tommy had seen everything. He'd noticed every sacrifice, every small act of love, every moment when his mother had put his needs before her own. Thank you for never telling me we're poor. I know we are because I hear kids at school talking about things they have that we don't have. But you never make me feel bad about it. You always say we have everything we need because we have each other. Mrs. Chen reached for a tissue from the box on her desk. Her carefully applied mascara was probably ruined by now, but she didn't care. Thank you for teaching me to be kind. You always say that being kind doesn't cost anything, and it's the most important thing. Even when people are mean to you, you're still nice to them. Like when your boss yells at you at the diner, you just smile and say, "Yes, sir," and then you come home and you're still nice to me. I want to be like you when I grow up. The afternoon sun had shifted and the classroom was growing dimmer. Mrs. Chen hadn't noticed. She was completely absorbed in the letter, in this window into a life she'd known nothing about. Thank you for keeping your promises. You promised me that everything would be okay, and I believe you. Even when I hear you crying at night in the bathroom when you think I'm asleep, I still believe you because you've never lied to me. Her hands were shaking now. She had to set the letter down for a moment and collect herself. In 15 years of teaching, she'd read thousands of assignments. She'd seen good work and bad work, creative work and lazy work, but she'd never read anything that affected her like this. I'm sorry I can't help more. I try to be good and not ask for things we can't afford. I try to do well in school so you can be proud. I try not to complain when we eat the same thing lots of days in a row. I wish I was bigger so I could work and help you. But I promise when I grow up I'm going to take care of you and you won't have to work so hard anymore. Mrs. Chen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window and looked out at the playground where children were still playing, their voices carrying on the afternoon air. She could see Tommy among them, sitting alone on a swing, not swinging, just sitting. She thought about his mother, who Tommy loved so fiercely and observed so carefully. A woman working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything, trying to give her son a good life despite circumstances that Mrs. Chen could only imagine. And she thought about Tommy, this 8-year-old boy who saw everything, who understood far more than he should have to understand at his age, who carried knowledge and worry that childhood should be protected from. Mrs. Chen returned to her desk and picked up the letter again. There was more. Thank you for telling me about Dad. I know it makes you sad to talk about him. I know he left when I was little, and I know that's why things are hard now. But you never say anything bad about him. You just say that sometimes people have to make difficult choices, and that he loved us the best way he could. I think you're trying to make sure I don't hate him. But I could never hate him as much as I love you. The letter was nearly done. Tommy's handwriting had gotten slightly messier toward the end, as if he'd been writing faster, trying to get everything out. Mom, I know you think I don't understand things, but I do. I understand that you gave up a lot to take care of me. I understand that you're always tired and your back hurts and you worry about money. I understand more than you think. And I want you to know that I see you. I see everything you do. And when I'm bigger, I'm going to make sure you never have to worry again. Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes again, but the tears kept coming. You're the best mom in the whole world. Not because you buy me things or because we live in a big house, but because you love me and you show me every single day. I'm the luckiest kid in the world because I have you. Thank you for everything. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Love, Tommy. She sat in silence for a long moment after finishing the letter. The classroom felt different now, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of Tommy's words. Mrs. Chen carefully folded the letter and set it on her desk, but she couldn't stop staring at it. The paper looked so ordinary, just a simple piece of notebook paper with a child's handwriting. But it held something extraordinary. She picked it up again and read through it a second time. Then a third. Each time new details jumped out at her. The way Tommy had noticed his mother's slow footsteps, the way he'd found the receipt for his birthday present, the way he stayed awake at night listening, worrying, watching over his mother the way she watched over him. Mrs. Chen thought back over the school year. It was already October, which meant Tommy had been in her class for almost 2 months. She tried to remember interactions with him, moments that might have hinted at what was really going on. He was always on time for school. That struck her now as significant. His mother, exhausted from working 2 jobs, still made sure he was never late. His homework was always completed, even if the worksheet sometimes had smudges or wrinkles, as if they'd been done on a surface that wasn't quite flat or stable. He never forgot his lunch, though she realized now that it was always simple. A sandwich, maybe an apple, a small bag of chips. Never the elaborate lunches some other kids brought with multiple containers and treats. She remembered back to the first week of school when she'd sent home a supply list. Most students had shown up the next day with new backpacks stuffed with fresh notebooks, boxes of crayons, and packages of pencils. Tommy had brought his supplies in a grocery bag. Everything had been there, everything on the list, but nothing was new. The notebooks had torn covers. The pencils were short, clearly used before. The box of crayons was a mixed collection, probably gathered from different places. At the time, Mrs. Chen had simply checked his name off the list and moved on. Now she wondered how his mother had managed to get even those supplies together. She wondered how many meals had been skipped, how many bills had been juggled to make sure Tommy had what he needed for school. There was also the incident with the field trip permission slip. The class was supposed to go to the Science Museum in November, and the cost was $15 per student. Mrs. Chen remembered Tommy taking the permission slip and information home. Days went by, and while other slips came back signed with checks attached, Tommy's didn't return. She'd finally asked him about it, keeping her voice light and casual. "Tommy, did you forget to bring back your field trip slip?" He'd looked down at his desk. "My mom's going to send it. She just has to check her schedule." Another week went by, then another. Mrs. Chen had assumed it was disorganization or forgetfulness. Now she understood. $15. That's all it was. But for Tommy's mother, $15 might have been the difference between paying the electric bill on time or eating dinner for several nights. How had she missed it? How had she not understood? Mrs. Chen stood and walked to the filing cabinet where she kept student records. She pulled out Tommy's file and returned to her desk. Inside was basic information: his address, his mother's name and contact information, emergency contacts. His address was for an apartment complex on the other side of town. Mrs. Chen knew the area vaguely. It wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't great either. The kind of place where people lived because rent was cheap, not because they wanted to. The emergency contacts section had only one name: Maria Rodriguez, the neighbor Tommy had mentioned in his letter. No father listed, no grandparents, no other family at all. His mother's name was Linda Turner. The phone number listed was a mobile number. Under employment, the form simply said, "Service industry," no specifics. Now Mrs. Chen understood why. Linda probably hadn't wanted to explain that she juggled 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Mrs. Chen pulled out her own phone and stared at the number on the file. She should call. She should reach out. But what would she say? "Hello, I read your son's letter and now I know how hard your life is?" That seemed intrusive, embarrassing even. Linda had clearly tried to keep their struggles private, to protect Tommy's dignity. But she couldn't just do nothing. The sound of children returning from recess filled the hallway. Mrs. Chen quickly put the file away and composed herself, wiping her eyes one more time and checking her reflection in the small mirror she kept in her desk drawer. She looked like she'd been crying, but there wasn't much she could do about that now. The students filed back in, their energy high from running around outside. Tommy came in last as usual, walking slowly to his desk. Mrs. Chen watched him. He didn't look sad or upset. He just looked like a normal 8-year-old boy. But she knew now that he carried thoughts and concerns that no 8-year-old should have to carry. "All right, everyone, settle down," Mrs. Chen said, clapping her hands together. "Let's get ready for math." The afternoon continued with its normal rhythm. Math lessons, then reading time, then a short science video about the solar system. Mrs. Chen went through the motions of teaching, but her mind kept drifting back to that letter, still sitting in her desk drawer where she'd placed it. When the final bell rang, students grabbed their backpacks and rushed toward the door. Mrs. Chen called out reminders about homework as they left. Tommy was gathering his things when she approached his desk. "Tommy, can you stay for just a minute?" she asked gently. He looked up, his expression worried. Kids always assumed they were in trouble when teachers asked them to stay behind. "You're not in trouble," she added quickly, seeing the concern on his face. "I just wanted to talk to you about your letter." He nodded slowly and stood by his desk while the last few students left the room. When they were alone, Mrs. Chen pulled a chair over and sat down so she was at his level. "I read your letter during lunch," she began. "Tommy, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever read." His cheeks flushed slightly, but he didn't say anything. "You're a very observant person," she continued. "You notice things. You pay attention. That's a special quality. Is my spelling okay?" he asked, his voice small. Mrs. Chen felt her heart crack a little. Here she was, overwhelmed by the emotional depth of what he'd written, and he was worried about spelling. "Your spelling is perfect," she assured him. "Everything about your letter is perfect. Your mom is going to treasure it." Tommy's face brightened a little at that. "I want you to know something," Mrs. Chen said carefully. She was treading into delicate territory and she knew it. "Everyone needs help sometimes, and asking for help isn't something to be ashamed of. It's actually really brave." Tommy's expression became guarded. "We're okay," he said quickly. "My mom takes good care of me." "I know she does," Mrs. Chen said gently. "I can tell from your letter that your mom loves you very much and works very hard for you. That's very clear. But there are programs and resources that can help make things a little easier. Not because your mom isn't doing a good job, but just because sometimes people need support. That's what communities are for." Tommy didn't respond. He was looking at his shoes. "Would it be okay if I talked to your mom sometime?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Just to introduce myself properly and let her know what a wonderful student you are." "I guess so," Tommy said, still not meeting her eyes. Mrs. Chen could see she was making him uncomfortable. The last thing she wanted was to embarrass him or make him feel like he'd revealed too much in his letter. "Okay," she said, standing up. "You can go now. Have a good evening, Tommy." He grabbed his backpack and headed for the door, but paused before leaving. "Mrs. Chen," he said, turning back. "Yes? Is my letter really okay? Like, you're not going to mark it all up with red pen?" She smiled. "Your letter is more than okay. It's perfect just the way it is. I wouldn't change a single word." He nodded and left, his worn sneakers squeaking slightly on the linoleum floor. Mrs. Chen returned to her desk and pulled out the letter again. She read it once more, slowly, taking in every detail. Then she picked up her phone and dialed the school counselor's number. "Hi, Patricia. It's Margaret Chen. Do you have a few minutes? I need to talk to you about one of my students." Over the next hour, Mrs. Chen filled Patricia in on everything. She read portions of the letter aloud. She shared her observations about Tommy. Patricia listened carefully, asking questions occasionally, taking notes. "There are definitely resources we can connect them with," Patricia said when Mrs. Chen finished. "Food assistance programs, utility assistance, community organizations that help with school supplies and clothing. The question is how to approach it without making the mother feel judged or investigated." "That's exactly what I'm worried about," Mrs. Chen said. "She's clearly proud and trying hard to provide for her son. I don't want her to feel like we're interfering or suggesting she's not doing enough." "How about this?" Patricia suggested. "The school is doing a family resource fair next month. We have representatives from various community organizations coming to share information about programs available to families. It's open to all parents, so it wouldn't single anyone out. We could make sure Linda gets a personal invitation, and maybe I could mention that I'd love to meet her and Tommy there." "That could work," Mrs. Chen agreed. "But that's not until next month. Is there anything we can do sooner?" Patricia was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Well, there's the food backpack program. We send kids home with backpacks full of food for the weekend. It's discreet, and we have several students in the program already. Tommy could definitely qualify. Would Linda have to fill out a lot of paperwork? Something tells me she wouldn't want to do that. Actually, you can nominate him as his teacher. I just need your signature and a brief explanation. We try to keep it simple for that exact reason. A lot of families who need help don't ask for it because the process seems overwhelming or invasive." "Let's do that then," Mrs. Chen said. "What else?" They talked through other possibilities. A holiday program in December that provided gifts for children, a winter coat drive that was starting soon, a tutoring program that was free but came with snacks and supplies for participants. Small things, carefully chosen not to seem like charity but like opportunities any student might access. When Mrs. Chen finally hung up, it was after 5 o'clock. The school was mostly empty, just a few teachers still in their rooms and the custodial staff beginning their evening rounds. She looked at Tommy's letter one more time. In the margin, in his careful handwriting, He'd written something she hadn't noticed before. It was small, almost hidden in the fold of the paper. P.S. I'm sorry if I made you sad with this letter. I didn't mean to. Mrs. Chen drove home that evening in a daze, Tommy's letter folded carefully in her purse. She couldn't bring herself to leave it at school. The words kept running through her mind over and over like a song she couldn't stop humming. Her own house felt different when she walked in. It was a modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, but suddenly it seemed like a mansion compared to what she now knew about Tommy's life. She had a spare bedroom that no one used, a kitchen full of appliances, a pantry stocked with more food than she needed, a closet full of clothes she rarely wore. Her husband, Richard, looked up from the couch where he was watching the news. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" She set her bags down and just stood there in the doorway. "That bad?" he asked, concern crossing his face. "No," she said, her voice catching. "Not bad, just, can I show you something?" She pulled out Tommy's letter and handed it to Richard. He unfolded it, glancing at her with curiosity before starting to read. Mrs. Chen watched his face as he went through it. She saw the moment it hit him, the way his expression shifted from casual interest to deep focus. His eyes moved more slowly as he continued. When he finished, he looked up at her. "This is from one of your students?" She nodded. 8 years old. Richard read through it again. When he was done, he carefully refolded it and handed it back to her. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," she admitted, sinking onto the couch beside him. "I talked to the school counselor. We're going to try to connect them with some resources, but I keep thinking about that mother. Working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything, and her son seeing all of it. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to worry about whether his mom has shoes without holes." Richard put his arm around her shoulders. "You can't save everyone, Margaret." "I know," she said, "but I can help this one family. I can do something." That night, Mrs. Chen couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Tommy and his mother, Linda. She wondered what their apartment looked like. She wondered if Linda was working her night shift right now, cleaning offices while Tommy slept on a bed she'd given up for him. She wondered how Linda felt, trying so hard to give her son a normal childhood despite circumstances that were anything but normal. Around 2 in the morning, Mrs. Chen got up and went to her home office. She opened her laptop and started researching. Local food banks, utility assistance programs, organizations that helped single mothers, scholarship programs for struggling families, free after-school programs, community resources she'd never needed to know about before. She made lists. She bookmarked websites. She wrote down phone numbers and contact names. By the time the sun started to rise, she had compiled a folder full of information, but she still hadn't figured out the most important part: how to help without hurting Linda's pride, without making Tommy feel singled out or embarrassed at school. The next morning at school, Mrs. Chen arrived early. She made copies of the resource information she'd gathered, not just for Tommy's family, but for all her students' families. If she sent information home with everyone, it wouldn't seem like she was targeting anyone specific. She also stopped by Patricia's office to fill out the paperwork for the food backpack program. Patricia had already started the process and just needed Mrs. Chen's signature. "He'll get his first backpack this Friday," Patricia said. "We'll pull him out of class at the end of the day. Very casual. Just say we need to see him for a minute. Several other kids get pulled at the same time, so it doesn't stand out. The backpack looks like a regular school backpack, and it's his to keep. Inside will be breakfast items, lunch items, snacks, and some easy dinner options. Enough food for a weekend. Does he have to bring the backpack back?" "Nope, we send a new one every week." The backpacks themselves are donated, so the kids get to build up a collection. A lot of them use them as regular backpacks, which is fine. The point is just to make sure they have food when they're not at school. Mrs. Chen felt a small weight lift from her chest. It wasn't everything, but it was something. "Thank you, Patricia." "Thank you for paying attention," Patricia replied. A lot of teachers don't notice when kids are struggling, or they notice but they don't do anything about it. That week, Mrs. Chen found herself watching Tommy more carefully. Not obviously, not in a way that would make him uncomfortable, but she noticed things she'd missed before. He was always neat and clean. His clothes might be worn, but they were always washed and pressed. His hair was combed. His hands were clean. His mother was clearly doing everything she could to make sure he looked cared for. He was also kind to other students. When someone dropped their pencil, he picked it up for them. When a classmate struggled with a math problem, He quietly helped without being asked. He never bragged or showed off. He never complained or whined. One day during lunch, Mrs. Chen noticed that a girl had forgotten her lunchbox at home. The girl was crying, embarrassed and hungry. Before Mrs. Chen could figure out a solution, Tommy appeared at the girl's table. He'd split his own lunch in half and offered her his sandwich. "I already ate part of mine," he lied. "I'm full anyway. You can have this." Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears right there in the cafeteria. Here was a child who probably went to bed hungry some nights, giving away half his lunch to someone else. He'd learned generosity from his mother, who gave even when she had nothing to spare. On Friday afternoon, just as Patricia had said, Tommy was called out of class near the end of the day. 3 other students were called at the same time, heading off to different locations for different reasons. Tommy returned about 10 minutes later with a new backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked pleased but not overly excited, as if he didn't want to draw attention to himself. Mrs. Chen saw him peek inside once when he thought no one was looking. She saw his eyes widen slightly, saw the small smile that crossed his face before he quickly zipped it back up. That evening, she wondered what happened when he got home. Did he show his mother the backpack full of food? Did Linda cry with relief? Or did she feel embarrassed that the school had identified them as needing help? Mrs. Chen hoped it was the former, but worried it might be the latter. The following week, something happened that Mrs. Chen hadn't anticipated. During math class, the students were working on word problems. One of the problems involved calculating the cost of groceries. It was meant to be a simple addition exercise, but it sparked a conversation. "My mom says groceries are too expensive now," one boy announced. "She says everything costs more than it used to." "My dad says the same thing," another student chimed in. "Sometimes we have to skip buying things we want so we can buy things we need," a girl added. Mrs. Chen saw Tommy's head come up. "Paying attention now. That's actually a really good point," Mrs. Chen said, seeing an opportunity. "Can anyone explain the difference between wants and needs?" Hands shot up around the room. "Needs are things you have to live," one student said, "like food and water. Wants are things that are nice but you don't really need them," another added, "like toys and candy." "Exactly right," Mrs. Chen said, "and sometimes families have to make hard choices about how to spend their money. Every family is different. Some families have more money, some have less, but what matters most isn't how much money a family has. What matters is love and taking care of each other." She saw Tommy relax slightly in his seat. The conversation continued, with students sharing their own experiences in age-appropriate ways. Some talked about saving allowance for things they wanted. Others mentioned times their families had to budget carefully. What struck Mrs. Chen was how open and matter-of-fact the children were. They didn't judge each other. They just accepted that people had different situations. She realized that kids were often better at this than adults were. That afternoon, Mrs. Chen decided it was time to reach out to Linda. She couldn't keep putting it off. She called the number on file during her planning period. The phone rang 4 times before a tired voice answered. "Hello? Hi, is this Linda Turner?" "Yes, who's this?" There was caution in her voice. "This is Margaret Chen, Tommy's teacher. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Oh," Linda's voice changed, became alert. "Is Tommy okay? Did something happen?" "Tommy's fine," Mrs. Chen rushed to assure her. "He's doing great, actually. I'm calling because I wanted to tell you what a wonderful student he is." There was a pause. "Really?" "Really," Mrs. Chen said warmly. "He's kind, thoughtful, hardworking, and extremely bright. He's a pleasure to have in class." She heard Linda let out a breath. "Thank you for telling me that. You don't know how much I needed to hear it today." "Are you free to talk for a few minutes?" Mrs. Chen asked gently. "I wanted to discuss a few things if you have time." "I have about 10 minutes before I need to get ready for work," Linda said. "What did you want to discuss?" Mrs. Chen had rehearsed this conversation in her mind a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, she wasn't sure how to start. She decided to be direct but kind. "We had an assignment this week where students wrote thank you letters to someone important in their lives. Tommy wrote his letter to you." "Oh," Linda said softly. "That's sweet." "It was more than sweet," Mrs. Chen continued. "Linda, your son wrote one of the most beautiful, heartfelt things I've read in 15 years of teaching. He sees you. He sees everything you do for him. He appreciates it all." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Mrs. Chen heard a small sound, almost like a sob being suppressed. "I'm sorry," Linda said, her voice thick. It's just been a really long week. You don't need to apologize, Mrs. Chen said. Linda, I'm calling because I want you to know that you're doing an amazing job. Tommy is thriving because of you. But I also want you to know that there are resources available that might make things a little easier. It's not because you're not doing enough, but just because sometimes people need support. We're managing, Linda said, her voice becoming guarded. I know you are, Mrs. Chen said quickly. I can see that. Tommy is well cared for, he's happy, he's doing great in school. You're clearly an incredible mother, but there are programs that exist specifically to help families, and there's no shame in accessing them. Linda was quiet for a moment. What kind of programs? Mrs. Chen went through the list she'd prepared, careful to keep her tone informational rather than pitying. Food assistance, utility help, free after-school programs that included tutoring and meals, community organizations that provided school supplies and clothing, the upcoming resource fair at school. I'm sending home information with all the students, Mrs. Chen said, so please don't feel like you're being singled out. But I wanted to personally let you know about these things because they really can help. Can I ask you something? Linda said after a moment. Of course. Did Tommy write something in his letter that made you worry about us? Mrs. Chen chose her words carefully. Tommy wrote about how much he loves and appreciates you. He wrote about all the things you do for him. He's a very observant child and he notices the sacrifices you make. That's what I got from his letter. Mostly just a beautiful expression of gratitude and obviously, but it also made you think we needed help. It made me think that you're working incredibly hard and that maybe some additional support could make your life a little bit easier. That's all. Linda was quiet on the other end of the phone. Mrs. Chen could hear sounds in the background, maybe a television or radio playing softly. She waited, giving Linda time to process. I appreciate you calling, Linda finally said. Her voice had lost some of its defensive edge. Can I be honest with you? Please, Mrs. Chen said. It's hard accepting help. I've been on my own with Tommy since he was 2. His father left and never looked back, never sent $1, never called. I was so angry for a long time and I promised myself I'd prove I didn't need anyone. I'd show everyone that I could take care of my son by myself. She paused. But lately I've been so tired, and I worry that Tommy knows things are hard. I try so hard to hide it from him. Linda, Mrs. Chen said gently. He knows, and that's okay. What he sees is a mother who loves him enough to work 2 jobs. A mother who puts his needs first. A mother who shows up for him every single day. That's what matters. She heard Linda sniff on the other end of the line. Thank you for saying that. I mean it, Mrs. Chen said. And about accepting help, can I share something with you? The way I see it, accepting support isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It takes courage to say, I'm doing my best and I could use some help. And it teaches Tommy an important lesson too. What lesson is that? That we're all part of a community, that people help each other, that there's no shame in asking for support when you need it, and someday when things are better for you, you'll help someone else. That's how it works. Linda was quiet again, but this time Mrs. Chen could hear her crying softly. I'm sorry, Linda said. I don't usually cry like this. Don't apologize. I cried too when I read Tommy's letter. Can I ask what he wrote? Specifically, I mean. Mrs. Chen hesitated. Why don't I make you a copy? You should read it yourself. His words, not my summary of them. I'd like that. They talked for a few more minutes before Linda had to go get ready for her night shift. Mrs. Chen hung up feeling like she'd made a small breakthrough, but knowing there was still so much more to do. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift in small but meaningful ways. Tommy came to school with his new backpack every Monday, returned it empty every Friday, and got a new one with fresh food. Mrs. Chen noticed he seemed a little less tired, a little more energetic. Linda attended the resource fair at school. Mrs. Chen spotted her coming in, looking nervous and out of place in her work uniform, clearly having come straight from her day job. Patricia met her immediately and walked her around to different booths, making introductions and collecting pamphlets. Mrs. Chen watched from a distance, not wanting to overwhelm Linda, but she caught her eye at one point and gave her an encouraging smile. Linda smiled back, looking slightly less uncomfortable. 2 weeks after the phone call, Linda came to school specifically to meet with Mrs. Chen after hours. She'd called ahead to set up an appointment. When she arrived, Mrs. Chen was struck by how young she looked, probably not even 30 yet. though there was a weariness around her eyes that added years. "Thank you for meeting with me," Linda said, as she sat down in the chair Mrs. Chen had pulled over. "Of course. I'm glad you came." Linda reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was Tommy's letter. "I wanted to thank you for making a copy of this for me. I've read it probably 100 times. It's special," Mrs. Chen agreed. "It broke my heart," Linda said honestly, "not because he said anything wrong, but because I realized he's been carrying so much. I thought I was protecting him, but he sees everything. He knows everything. He loves you very much," Mrs. Chen said. "That comes through in every word." Linda nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I wanted to tell you that I applied for some of the programs you told me about. The food assistance and the utility help. It was hard to fill out those forms. To check boxes that basically say, I can't afford to feed my family. But I did it. That took courage. I also wanted to tell you that I got approved for a better position at the diner. More hours, better pay, daytime only. I can drop the night cleaning job. Linda, that's wonderful. It means I'll be home with Tommy at night. I can help him with homework. I can read him those bedtime stories without falling asleep in the middle." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I can be more present for him." They talked for almost an hour. Linda shared more about her story, her struggles, her hopes for the future. Mrs. Chen listened, offered encouragement, and provided information about other resources as they came up naturally in conversation. Before Linda left, she said something that stayed with Mrs. Chen for a long time afterward. "You know what the hardest part of poverty is?" Linda asked. "It's not the lack of money, though, that's awful. It's the shame. It's feeling like you're invisible, like your struggles don't matter because they're happening quietly behind closed doors. When you called me and told me you saw us, that you saw what I was doing for Tommy, it was the first time in years I felt like I wasn't invisible, so thank you for that." Mrs. Chen hugged her then, a long hug that said everything words couldn't convey.